Shonen is a timeless genre as old as anime itself. Depicting the fantasy of a heroic lifestyle, My Hero Academia has set the anime community ablaze with its fantasy world of superpowers and heroes and has risen to glory and fame within half a decade, with millions of viewers worldwide. Today, we're going to be looking at a recap of Season 1 of My Hero Academia. Act 1, World Building and Departure, Episode 1. The universe of My Hero Academia is that of superpowers called quirks. The origins of quirks go back to a luminescent baby being born in King City, China. Thereafter, people and children all around the world began experiencing this phenomenon and received these superpowers. Those who used these superpowers for the good of the common public became known as heroes, while those who spread evil and had nefarious intentions with their quirks came to be called villains. A young Bakugo Katsuki mocks his childhood friend Midoriya Izuku, the protagonist of the story, while defending another child from being bullied. Bakugo mocks Midoriya for being born quirkless and weakling. Now present in his class at Aldera Junior High, the homeroom teacher asks Izuku about his plans for the future. The class erupts into laughter and mockery once they hear Izuku plans to go to UA, the most prestigious hero training institution. While this occurs, elsewhere in the city, a slimy green monster roams the street, terrorizing citizens, but unfortunately, it escapes. After class, Izuku's classmate and childhood friend Bakugo approaches him and reinstates his weakness of being quirkless, all the while throwing Izuku's notebook, which contained his plans for being a future hero, out of the class's window. Later on, Izuku attempts to recover his notebook from a dark, ominous part of the school in a pond. He reminisces about watching a video of All Might, the #1 hero and his childhood idol. A slimy green villain appears and attacks Izuku. Suddenly, All Might appears and saves him. Izuku grabs onto him as he flies away. When they land, Izuku asks All Might whether a quirkless person like him could become a hero. Crossing the first threshold, Episode 2. Izuku sees All Might transform from his giant muscular stature to a small, thin man. All Might shows the young boy a grotesque wound on his stomach. He tells him that a hero puts everything on the line, and cannot assure Izuku that he can become a hero whilst being quirkless. All Might then leaves to capture the villain. At Tatooine train station, Bakugo and his friends are attacked by the green monstrosity, with Bakugo being captured and several heroes trying to defeat the monster. All Might watches, unable to help as he's not able to transform into his superhero state. Izuku faces his first threshold, and is at the site of the explosions. As Izuku watches Bakugo struggle, he realizes that his classmate might die at the villain's hands. Seeing this, Izuku loses self-control and jumps at the villain without a second thought, throwing his school bag at the enemy to try and find an opening. Izuku tries desperately to save Bakugo, but the monster recovers and tries to attack the two teenagers. However, All Might appears and saves both Izuku and Bakugo using a move called Detroit Smash. Once the situation is resolved, Bakugo continues to mock Izuku, feeling embarrassed about being saved. All Might meets with Izuku and, inspired by his bravery, tells the boy he has the potential to become an outstanding hero, despite being quirkless. Having his dream acknowledged by his idol, Izuku is sent into a whirlwind of emotions. Heroic Aid and Transformation, Episode 3. All Might informs an already emotional Izuku that he's worthy to inherit his quirk, giving him the heroic aid he desired for so long. Izuku remains confused, for quirks can't be inherited. All Might explains the quirk he possesses, One for All, is able to be passed down from one successor to the next, and it has selected Izuku as its successor. Izuku is informed by All Might that One for All places a tremendous strain on the body and he needs to train for at least a year to have the bare minimum qualification to use the quirk without being severely injured. And so, All Might has Izuku clean the Takoba seaside bay of its enormous mountains of trash, as a way to strengthen Izuku's body within 10 months and undergoes a transformation, in time for UA's entrance exam. A few hours before the entrance exam, All Might makes Izuku eat a hair of his to transfer the quirk properly to him through DNA. A mysterious girl saves Izuku as he trips. At the test site, President Mick, a hero, explains the entrance exam consists of 2 parts: the practical exam in which the candidates need to defeat heroes, and the written exam. Izuku soon arrives at his practical examination site. Episode 4. In the training field, Izuku notices Uraraka Ochako, the girl who saved him, and wishes to thank her. He's stopped by Ida Tenya, another candidate who warns him not to distract Ochako. The exam suddenly begins and everyone rushes out to the test area, while Izuku is left behind. He tries to catch up by following the crowd, but is attacked by a robot test villain worth 1 point. Fortunately, another participant called Aoyama Yugo saves him. Afterward, Izuku scrambles to find robots to score points, but finds the majority of them have been taken out. As the test nears its end, Izuku remains at a standstill with 0 points. Suddenly, Izuku sees a gigantic robot smashing buildings and traps Ochako underneath some of the debris. Threatening to crush her, Izuku remembers Ochako's help and leaps out. Using the power of One for All, Izuku smashes the giant robot, sending it to the ground. Ochako saves him from hitting the ground, but due to the repercussions of the quirk, the boy breaks one of his arms and both his legs and passes out. However, the school nurse, Recovery Girl, heals him. A week after the test, All Might sends a letter to Izuku to give him the results of his test. A holographic projection of All Might tells him while he didn't score any villain points for defeating enemies, he scored 60 rescue points. The participants were not told about this point system, which were given on the basis of saving people, as the judges decide there's more to a hero than offensive capabilities. This allows him to pass the exam and place 7th among the top 10 through his heroic spirit. Episode 5. Come April, the academic session of the UA begins. Izuku's mother wishes him good luck as he leaves. Soon he arrives at Class 1A. This would be the beginning of his road of trials. Upon his arrival, he finds both Ida and Bakugo inside. Ida notices Izuku and introduces himself. At the same time, Ochako, the girl from earlier, arrives and shows her gratitude to Izuku for saving her. They are interrupted by the arrival of a darkly dressed man. He announces his name as Aizawa Shota and will be their homeroom teacher. Shota immediately hands out PE uniforms and informs the students they'll participate in a quirk apprehension test. In the PE ground, the students are tasked with throwing a ball as far as they can using their quirks and are told whoever places last will meet the unfortunate fate of being expelled. All the students excel at the test, except Izuku, who has his quirk erased by Shota. He explains that he has the ability to erase quirks and that Izuku would devastate himself if he used his quirk, calling him a liability due to this. Izuku is given another chance to throw the ball. This time, however, he thinks outside of the box and focuses the power of One for All at his fingertips at the last second, which allows him to explosively throw the ball, shocking both classmates and Shota. Episode 6. All Might, who had watched this entire scene play out, is impressed by Izuku's quick thinking. On the other hand, Bakugo lashes out at Izuku, angry that he'd never known of his quirk. He's promptly stopped by the teacher Shota, who informs the class not to make him use his quirk too often, and informs the class that the expulsion rule was just a ruse, meant to bring out the best in everyone. Recovery Girl once again heals the badly injured finger of Izuku, and the school day comes to an end. The next day, the students of Class 1A go through a normal day of classes until All Might leads them to Ground B, with the students wearing the hero costumes they decided as a prerequisite to studying in UA for Hero Basic Training Class. All Might explains the class will be divided into 2 teams of 2, one acting as heroes and the other as villains. The heroes must try and stop the villains from deploying a nuclear bomb. If time runs out, the villains win. This would be a moment of trial and quest for Izuku, a chance to prove himself. Team A with Izuku and Ochako and Team D with leaders Ida and Bakugo get ready to face off against each other. Team D act as the villains and head inside to find the bomb to set up first. After 5 minutes, Team A heads inside. Almost immediately, they're attacked by Bakugo, who waits for them to enter. It is at this point that the long-awaited battle between Bakugo and Izuku plays off. To the fiery Bakugo's surprise, Izuku tells him in the same notebook he tossed out he had analyzed every single one of Bakugo's moves, and so the battle continues. Episode 7. Izuku and Bakugo had grown up together. The latter always felt superior to Izuku and was annoyed by his heroic behavior from a young age, laying the seeds of hate and starting a battle to demoralize and crush Izuku, especially after it's discovered that he's quirkless. As the battle rages on, both Izuku and Ochako find an opportunity to fall back and eventually split up. Izuku would fight Bakugo, while Ochako would look for the weapon. She finds the weapon a few floors above Izuku after hearing Ida talking to himself about acting as a villain. Ochako laughs hearing this, causing Ida to discover her. Beforehand, Ida had cleared the room of all objects to make sure she couldn't use her zero-gravity ability, incapacitating Ochako. Meanwhile, Izuku and Bakugo end up fighting once again, with Bakugo storing his sweat and causing a massive explosion with it using his quirk. Ochako makes use of this explosion using her zero-gravity quirk, but is stopped by Ida's super speed ability. To create an opening, Izuku purposefully lets himself get hit with Bakugo's quirk, knowing he can't compete with Bakugo's ability, and makes use of the chance to destroy the floors above him using One for All. This gives Ochako the chance to use her ability, as the once clear room was now filled with debris she could use. She grabs the weapon and disarms it, causing Team A to win. Episode 8. Realizing their loss, Bakugo begins to hyperventilate and panic over the fact he lost to Izuku. All Might consoles him and makes him realize he requires critique. Meanwhile, Izuku is sent to the nurse's office due to the after effects of One for All. Afterward, the same procedure of testing follows until the entire class has been through this procedure. Izuku had finally gotten the redemption that he'd wished for. When Izuku awakens, he finds all his classmates complimenting him in awe of his ability. He notices Bakugo isn't there and goes off to find him. Eventually, he finds an emotional Bakugo who was hurt by his failure and critique from the faculty. Crying, Bakugo promises that one day he'll surpass both Izuku and All Might, becoming the #1 hero, and storms off. Episode 9. During Class 1A's homeroom, Izuku is elected by the students as class representative. However, he later passes down this position to Ida because Izuku believes leadership is not his forte. When the time for class approaches, Shota announces that the students are required to go to an off-campus facility for training purposes. The young heroes eventually arrive at their destination and are greeted by the famous rescue hero 13. Her greeting includes an introduction to her facility, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, USJ, and she continues to give a small speech, interrupted by a portal appearing behind her. Within moments, horror fills the facility as villains appear through the dark, dreary portal. Act 2. The Belly of the Whale, Episode 10. The villains speak to each other expressing their disappointment at All Might not being present, as it seemed he was their objective. Here, a mysterious figure appears to be leading 3 other villains. Izuku and his friends are plunged into the belly of the whale. They must now make use of all their knowledge and aptitude to fend off the villains. Shota and 13 take charge. 13 evacuates with the students while Shota attempts to hold the villains at bay in a tough-fought battle. The villain Kurogiri eventually stops the evacuating group using his quirk. He discloses that he's part of a league of villains who aim to kill All Might before warping the class to different locations in the facility. A number of battles break out with Izuku and Tsuyu defeating a shark-like villain in a shipwreck zone. Meanwhile, a group of classmates encourages Ida to run back to UA to get help, and he reluctantly agrees. A villain stops Ida dead in his tracks. However, Space Hero fends off the villain. Eventually, Izuku and his group who are surrounded by villains formulated a place to escape. Mid-discussion, the villains break the ship they're hiding in. Izuku forcefully enacts his plan and uses Delaware Smash on the water to create a vortex, sucking in the villains. Izuku, Minoru, and Tsuyu eventually are able to escape and decide to go to the central plaza where Eraserhead, Shota, is fighting a huge group of villains. A number of battles between UA students and villains erupt all over the facility, with Shoto, an ice and fire manipulating student, defeating a small group of villains and interrogating them. Elsewhere, Kaminara Denki, Kyoko Jiro, and Yaoyorozu Momo also eventually defeat a group of villains. Near the USJ entrance, Eraserhead continues fighting Shigaraki Tomura, the ringleader. With Tomura's DK quirk, he's able to dish out huge amounts of damage to Shota. Tomura eventually releases a monstrous entity called a Nomu, which instantly subdues Eraserhead. At another zone, 13 and Space Hero continue fighting Kurogiri, who prevents Ida from escaping. Shoji Mezo grabs Kurogiri, and with the help of other classmates, Ida is given a path to the exit, and he's able to leave. Seeing this, Kurogiri retreats back a short distance and announces the villain's plans are ruined. Rescue from Without, Episode 12. Ida runs into All Might, who is coincidentally heading to USJ. He rushes to the central plaza at an unfathomable speed and defeats all the villains in an instant and secures Izuku, Tsuyu, and Minoru, proving to be the rescue from without for our protagonist. Izuku tries to warn All Might about Nomu's superhuman endurance, but All Might says the symbol of peace will be alright. A terrifying fight engages between the two, with All Might pulling out strong moves such as a Carolina Smash and a reverse suplex. Izuku realizes All Might is pushing him, and amidst the chaos, Kurogiri uses a portal to send half of the Nomu's body back at All Might through the ground, grabbing All Might's weakened point, the wound on his body. Izuku tries to help All Might but is stopped by Kurogiri. Eventually, Shoto is able to freeze the Nomu and help All Might break free. All Might realizes the Nomu can't be defeated by normal means. He pushes his body to use One for All above 100%, delivering a punch and sending the Nomu flying out of the building, defeating it. Act 3. The Return, Episode 13. In the mountain zone of the USJ, Tesla takes Kaminari Denki hostage and threatens to kill Denki if the others don't surrender. This pushes the group of students between a rock and a hard place. Unable to figure out what to do, they're forced to surrender. Meanwhile, All Might reaches his limit after defeating the Nomu and transforms into his weakened state. With the rest of the villains remaining, the situation takes a U-turn. Shigaraki and Kurogiri are about to attack when Ida appears once again, this time with a group of heroes next to him. Seeing this, the ringleader Shigaraki decides the villains have no option but to retreat. Using Kurogiri's portals, all the villains, including Tesla, retreat back into their hideout, with two ominous voices inquiring them about their mission and the whereabouts of the Nomu. One appears to be the master of Tamura. Back at USJ, All Might consoles a lamenting Izuku about his minimal role in the fight as they're both being healed by Recovery Girl. All Might commends all the students of Class 1A and their bravery in facing the villains. Izuku finally gets the return from this near-death situation. Later that night, Izuku is released from the infirmary of Recovery Girl and leaves. He finds Ochaka and Ida waiting for home along with them. Somewhere else in the city, a menacing figure overlooks the city. Our protagonist, having overcome many trials with the fellowship of his idol and classmates in Class 1A, now stood proud. Having overcome the once weak, quirkless person he was, he awaited the next call to action he would come across in the future. Thank you for tuning in to our video. If you want us to recap Season 2 of Hero Academia, comment down below. If you have any other request or topic you want us to cover, comment those down below too. Share this video with other anime fans, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.